Well, I'm Blair Ruble, and I'm Vice President for Programs at the Wilson Center, and I want to welcome everyone. We're very pleased to be working with our colleagues from the Anacostia Community Museum and our Smithsonian colleagues to host what is really going to be a remarkable day, this conference marking the anniversary of a landmark exhibition, Black Mosaic. And what's interesting about it, and you'll hear a little bit in the introductions, is that this was an exhibit that is 20 years old, and yet the themes and the material are just as fresh today as they were then. And I think this speaks well of the people who originated the concept, fulfilled it, the museum, Portia and her colleagues. And it also speaks well of Ariana, who, when she was given sort of custodianship of this collection, realized that this is material that speaks to today and needs to be brought forward. So we're looking forward to today. The issues that we're going to be talking about, perceptions and reality of race, class, nationality, ethnicity, really are among the most difficult subjects in American society. And while I don't think that we're going to resolve or answer any questions, I hope that we can prompt a useful discussion, which will continue once people leave the Wilson Center and leave the building. We're proud to be co-sponsors of the event. And when I say the Wilson Center, it's not just the Wilson Center as a whole. There are several programs. Duncan and colleagues, Duncan Wood and his colleagues at the Mexico Institute, Roger Mark D'Souza, who's on the program, and is himself a Trinidadian immigrant to Washington. And so Roger Mark and his colleagues with our Global Sustainability Resilience Program, Mande Muyangwa, who directs our Africa program, all contributed to the effort. And of course, I think we all know that while the directors are important, it's really the people in the AV office, John Tyler and his colleagues, the catering facilities, which you'll grow to appreciate even more as you move through the day, and our special events program office, Maria Stella Gazulis, Veronica Allen, Howard and Prince, who helped set up the room, Javier and the cafe. These are really all people who make things work. But I want to give a particular mention to Thea Cook. I think many of you have met Thea. She has really worked hard to make this event come together. And she's a daughter of Anacostia, and I am proud to be working with her, and I know that she's very enthusiastic about everything that's going on today. Obviously, we want to thank our museum colleagues as well. You'll hear from a moment from Director Akeju, Tiffany Aites, and then I want to give a special shout out to Ariana Curtis, who worked here when she was a graduate student. And she was just saying how different the room looks from this side than it does from when you're out there passing microphones around. And it's really wonderful to have her on this side of the podium. So cities throughout the world are experiencing growing ethnic, religious, racial, national diversity. And despite instances of communal strife, which we all hear about every day, it's important to remember that diversity can be accommodated. And it can be accommodated by creating the physical spaces, the public spaces, the symbolic spaces that can be shared by all residents of a city and reinforce common ties. And the challenge for our citizens and policymakers alike is to expand those spaces, and to do so by expanding opportunities, both economic opportunities and opportunities for personal development. I was just at a meeting at the UN where they were talking about what should cities become. And the conversation revolved around the concept of cities must be places of promise. And one of the things about the immigrant experience everywhere is that immigrants arrive in a place full of promise because they wouldn't really have left unless there was some reason pushing them. But how can that promise be realized? I think the voices that emerged from the exhibit and the materials around the exhibit 20 years ago begin to point in a direction of how we need to think about how to make our cities of promise. And I think over the next few hours, we'll explore those themes usefully in more detail. And as I said, this is a conversation which began 20 years ago and is going to need to continue at least another 20 years and probably more. So this is just a kind of Polaroid, a selfie snapshot in a longer process. So with that, let me invite Director Akeju to make some opening remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Ruble. In 1994, the museum developed the documentation and exhibition project entitled Black Mosaic, Community, Race, and Ethnicity Among Black Immigrants in Washington. This groundbreaking exhibition revealed the transformation of communities in Washington, D.C., impacted by new immigration to the city. From this project, educational material grew to serve broader audiences and foster unique music programming such as African Fete, Música Latina, the exhibition and program project Beyond the Reggae Beat, and our current Metro Mambo series. I welcome you here today as we celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Black Mosaic exhibition. This Revisiting Our Black Mosaic Symposium will feature a full day of conversations on this continuing story. From the enthusiastic response to this symposium, it's obvious that these themes are as relevant today as they were 20 years ago. Today's symposium is a collaborative event, and I would like to acknowledge our partners here at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars, especially Dr. Blair Ruble, for helping make this event possible with their generous support. I also thank our Smithsonian partners, including the National Museum of African American History and Culture, coming to a mall near you in a very short time, I hope, the Consortia for Understanding the American Experience, and the Consortia for Valuing World Cultures. I would also like to acknowledge the Smithsonian Institution's Latino Initiatives Pool for providing us with resources not only for this event, but for also making it possible for us to add Ariana Curtis to our staff. Yay. Ariana, as you know, developed and facilitated this symposium. As always, we thank our ACM donors, advisory board, and staff for their continued support, input, and hard work. We are particularly honored to have Dr. Audrey Singer from the Metropolitan Policy Program at the Brookings Institution and a longtime resident of Washington, D.C., as the keynote speaker for Revisiting Our Black Mosaic. I also thank each of the distinguished panelists. There are far too many to name up here, but they're all itemized in your brochure. And we are honored and grateful to the 23 different offices, institutions, and organizations represented by our lineup of these 26 presenters. It's a long list, but it's a very impressive list, and I hope you get to mix and match and visit all of the different sessions. Let me just tell you a little bit about the museum. The Anacostia Community Museum was established by the Smithsonian Institution in September of 1967. In fact, we celebrated our 47th anniversary on Monday. It was established as the Anacostia Neighborhood Museum in Southeast Washington, D.C. The museum's early work included documentation, exhibitions, and public programs focused on local history and community issues. Then and now, our work is inclusive and includes community engagement on a variety of levels. We were trailblazers in the aspect of bringing the community into the operations of the museum, and community members took part in everything we did, from programming to constructing exhibits to um, uh, collections policies, and it was very important. With the adoption of a new mission in 2008, our work now reflects a new commitment to examining issues that impact urban communities with both global and local implications. The Anacostia Community Museum's new mission is to enhance understanding of contemporary urban experiences and strengthen community bonds by conserving the past, documenting the present, and serving as a catalyst for shaping the future. As was the case from its inception, ACM developed new approaches to the role that museums play in preserving history and culture, and especially on how communities are viewed, not as socially isolated, but as part of the natural built environment, and at the nexus of both local and global economic, political, and cultural forces. Our vision is to use our work to challenge perceptions, generate new knowledge, and deepen understanding about the ever-changing concepts and realities of communities. Throughout its storied 47-year history, the museum has conducted many important documentation projects, over 165 exhibitions, countless public programs, speaking to the concerns, issues, and triumphs of communities. All of these works telling an extraordinary story of everyday people. Black Mosaic was one of the first community documentation projects to examine race, ethnicity, and community of Black immigrants in the Washington, D.C. area. Black Mosaic was not just an exhibition in 1994, but rather a community-centered research project that extended for many years prior to the exhibit and engaged diverse community groups and individuals in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. So this symposium is a continuation of that work. I'm sure we will be pursuing this topic, as Dr. Ruble said, for unfortunately generations to come. I don't see where the issue of race and ethnicity in this country is going to take a back burner anytime soon. And I recently returned from a conference in Ireland, and there are issues in Europe as well. So this is a global concern. So now it is my pleasure to hand over the podium to Ms. Portia James, the Supervisory Curator at the Anacostia Community Museum and the curator of the original 1994 exhibition, Black Mosaic, Community, Race, and Ethnicity among Black immigrants in Washington, D.C. So enjoy. Thank you so much for coming.
There are plenty of seats in the front. People want to come up.
Thank you, Camille. I just want to point out that 2017 is the 50th anniversary of the Anacostia Community Museum. And so for us, we're approaching a major landmark. Of course, as with most anniversaries, we're taking a long look at our history and the work that's been done. One of the things about claiming to be a community-based museum is that you can never relax. You can never assume that you're there. Being community-based is something you're forever striving for. And it's been a very challenging struggle, I'll tell you. So we're taking some time between now and 2017 to examine the museum's history and to rethink the ways that we think about our work and the way we approach our work. Hopefully, you'll see some of the results of that self-examination in the near future. The 1994 opening of the Black Mosaic exhibition proved to be a major milestone for us also. It fundamentally changed the way that we think about and the way we do our work. we learned a lot about how to more effectively engage people and communities. And the people with whom we worked challenged us, really challenged many of our assumptions about race, about ethnicity and nationality. It also taught us something about the power of sharing stories and how it allows people to connect with something, with each other. Most of what made Black Mosaic work was the power of those narratives. Visitors to the exhibition congregated at the listening stations and used those narratives as starting points to share their own stories of leaving home, of arriving, of the hopes and dreams they had for themselves and their children, and of building new communities. That was one of our marks of success for the exhibition, to see the folks gathered at those listening stations and to see the spontaneous conversations that they would generate amongst themselves. And I'd like to take the opportunity to once again thank the folks who worked on the Black Mosaic project, the original people who contributed. I think I see Mrs. Quander there in the second row. I'm sorry, I meant to get to you last night and thank you in person. It's their interviews and photographs that we developed during the project that remain one of the most important and valuable collections in the museum's permanent collection. But in many ways, the collection is only as good or as valuable as the program that uses it to engage audiences. And so we're developing new and updated programming around the materials that we gathered. When the Black Mosaic project was undertaken in 1994, the mission of the museum focused on African American history and culture. Since then, as Camille said, we've changed the mission, returning to what was, aside from African American history, the other central focus of the founding museum staff in the 1960s. That is a focus on what's going on in urban communities. And to help us realize that new mission, we're particularly excited about the work and the vision that Dr. Ariana Curtis, our new curator of Latino studies, brings to the museum. She'll be doing some things with the Black Mosaic collection, of course, putting it back to work, but she's also developing some exciting new projects, which we hope will engage new communities and develop new constituencies for the museum. So we're still really trying to move into our mission and exploring the different avenues where that will take us. So this symposium and what we learned from it today is part of our effort to rethink the way that we do our work, and hopefully will lead us to new pathways and new collaborations. Very excited to work with the Wilson Center today, and hopefully we'll be building many new collaborations and partners, and looking forward to developing new strategies to engage our public audiences. And with that, I'd like to bring up to the microphone Dr. Ariana Curtis, who organized the events today. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Like Blair said, it feels very different on this side. I've gone to many events at the Wilson Center and sat where you're sitting, so. I'm thrilled to see everyone here today. I'm going to try to keep my remarks relatively brief. Initially, I thought I would talk about the importance of museum collections, given that this symposium is based on a collection. But I thought a better use of this time would actually be to give you a long answer to the questions that I'm asked most often about this event, which are, who are you and why are you doing this? So I'm relatively new to the Smithsonian. I've been working at the Anacostia Community Museum for 18 months now, and I'm the first curator dedicated to Latino history and culture at that museum. And what excited me most about the job when I was applying, when I was interviewing, was the focus on urban communities. Urban spaces are some of the most diverse in the country and in the world. And with DC as my home base for research, this job includes absolutely everything. So since I see everything as related to Latino issues, part of orienting myself to my new job was familiarizing myself with the past work of the museum. So within a few months, maybe even a few weeks of starting, I was assigned to the Black Mosaic collection. As you can see from the notebook, which hopefully you got when you entered, the exhibition itself was in the museum 1994 to 1995. So I wasn't assigned to reviving the exhibition per se, but rather to serve as the point of contact for inquiries about the collection. It's the museum collection that most obviously and directly relates to Latino history and culture in the Washington, D.C. area. So this collection strikes a very deep personal chord with me. I'm the youngest child of two Black parents, one immigrant, one native born, one Panamanian, one African American. I've lived and worked abroad as well as various parts of the US, and throughout my life have certainly felt the elasticity of Blackness and the social construction of race. So at times I felt the difference between how I identify and how I describe myself versus how other people maybe will describe me based on different places where I've lived. So when I reviewed the dense oral histories and the archival material of Black Mosaic, box after box, it just gave me such a range of emotions as well as multiple project ideas. So like I said, I started this job in 2013 and knew that the 20th anniversary in 2014 was the perfect opportunity to celebrate and revisit our Black Mosaic. I know some people think that celebrating an exhibition is a strange choice of words. So to better understand the noteworthiness, I want to talk a bit about context. The exhibition opened in 1994, but with any exhibition, the meat of the research, identifying stakeholders, gathering interviews, oral histories, photographs, all of that was happening in the late 1980s, early 1990s. And there was a lot of things happening at that time. The Mount Pleasant riots took place in DC in May 1991. The interviews in Black Mosaic have many references to the riots, especially the problems and the healing taking place at that time between the Latino and African American communities in DC, as well as the community and the police. A federal investigation followed the riots, and in 1993, the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights produced a report. The Mount Pleasant report was just the first in a series of reports on racial and ethnic tensions in American communities. There were many others, including one after the more well-known 1992 Los Angeles riots. So I say this to say that it was a time of glaring racial and ethnic conflict, both nationally and locally. And I cannot imagine the resistance that this project proposal received. The museum, which at the time was focused on African American history and culture, decided to invest time, resources, and money into a community documentation project about quote-unquote Black immigrants in the DC area. The Smithsonian was also under fire at that time. In May 1994, a report called Willful Neglect was published. The report, which was authored by a task force, criticized the Smithsonian for their poor record in hiring and promoting Latinos within the institution and the scarcity of contributions to American art, culture, and science within the institution's programming, exhibitions, and collections. So in the wake of the Mount Pleasant riots, as the Smithsonian was being called out for its absence of Latino presence, and in a climate of local and national racial conflict, in August 1994, the Anacostia Museum presented Black Mosaic, Community, Race, and Ethnicity Among Black Immigrants in Washington, D.C. And so for those like me that deal every day in the politics of representation, this was a very bold statement. It's significant, and I think it's worth celebrating. So you only need to look back 25 years or so to see some intense events that shook race relations and D.C. history right to the core of the Smithsonian. It's also not lost on me that without the mission expansion of the Anacostia Museum from African American focus to one that focuses on urban communities, without the Willful Neglect reports and the subsequent creation of the Latino Center and the Latino Initiatives Pool, my job would not exist. So I'm relatively new, but completely aware that I'm the product of visionaries who put in long years of hard work and struggle, and I'm indebted and grateful to those movements and those moments that made my being here possible. And without Black Mosaic, I would not have this dense body of work to draw from for my current research projects, and I assure you that really every single one of my projects draws in some way from that collection. So why this event? Well, this is a great moment for me as a newbie to engage and interact with as many people as possible around a museum collection and community issues that are both deeply personal as well as professional. These issues are also timely and clearly of shared concern. We have over 170 people registered for today's events. And it's also a wonderful way for a new curator to show the public how museum work can play a role in engaging community dialogues even outside of a museum setting. So for the anniversary, I thought a contemporary conversation broken into smaller thematic pieces was the best way to highlight places where Black Mosaic is strong. For example, it deals so well with the complexity of individual identity and also the tensions between individual identity and group belonging. And you see some of that actually represented in the program booklet on pages 2 and 3. We chose small excerpts from interviews, and those actually come from the collection themselves, as well as the photos. I also wanted this to be an opportunity to extend the reach of this conversation, better incorporating African and African American voices into our Black Mosaic. So I attempted to create sessions with more balanced representation in that way. You can also see in your program booklet that every presenter shared what he or she loves about the DC area, which leads me to the last thing I want to highlight about the collection and through this event is the geographic framework of the DC metro area. Until quite recently, DC was a minority majority city, and more specifically, a Black majority city. And so Black includes, but is not limited to meaning African American, and that context matters in every single conversation that we're going to have today. So I attended graduate school at American University, and the first DC-specific research project that I worked on was Blair Ruble's Washington's U Street, a biography. So I was a research assistant here at the Wilson Center, and he's been a wonderful mentor to me in that time, still today. We've remained in contact, and when I started actually at the Smithsonian, he took me out to lunch and said, you know, if ever there's a reason you think we could collaborate, let me know. And just months later, I cooked up this event. I thought of a reason. But it's focused on urban community and the DC community specifically, really to create this timely partnership with the Urban Sustainability Laboratory here at the Wilson Center. And like Blair said, it really has been the Wilson Center that I received enthusiastic responses, great meetings, and great support from the directors of the Africa Program, the Mexico Institute, and Population Environmental Security and Resilience. The Anacostia Community Museum and the Wilson Center share the understanding that museums, immigration, identity, coalition building, education, and gentrification are contemporary global issues. This event puts them in a local context, and we all agree that the larger idea behind this gathering is that it be a launch point for actionable ideas. So what do I want people to take away from the conversations today? First, I'd like to flip that question into what do I want people to contribute to today? I would love to hear candid conversations about our DC community. There are a variety of pictures and excerpts from oral histories in the collection in the program booklet. And as you read through them, you can see that they suggest moments of pride, of pain, confusion, validation. Let's talk about it. There'll be at least 15 to 20 minutes in every session for audience response. So I hope you're not here simply to listen to our panel of experts, but also that you came to contribute to the conversation. I would also like each of us, myself included, to leave with a larger network than when we arrived. This is a real opportunity to redefine who we include when we talk about our DC community from both personal and professional standpoints. And there's one thing that I really want everyone to take away from today. Let this 20th anniversary of Black Mosaic be a reminder of, or an introduction to, the idea that museums are sites of critical community conversations. So we're here in celebration of Black Mosaic, the Community Documentation Project, the people whose hard work and candor made it possible, the exhibition, the programming, the community celebrations, the legacy that it's left, and the exchanges like this one that continue because of it. So I have to say that this event actually reached capacity much sooner than I thought that it would. So I had to cut off the wait list and deny people entrance, and I'm sorry. But that does let me know that we really are onto something here. And I'm confident that this will be one of many conversations. You know, as everyone has said, identity is so dynamic and the work is ongoing. So I'd like to echo Camille in thanking all the programs in the Wilson Center and the many sectors of the Smithsonian that supported this event, and to our impressive lineup of presenters and our keynote speaker. Thank you for believing in my vision for this day and adding your unique voices to it. We're excited for you to share your expertise and the actionable ideas that you'll inspire in all of us. And may this be the first of many collaborative efforts that we do together. So that's it. That's all I will say for now. Thank you for your attention. Please enjoy the breakfast outside, and I do want to let you know that you can take the food into the conference rooms. So I'm looking forward to everything that's going to happen today, and thank you.
Now you all know the secret of why my book is so good. We will now move to some breakout sessions. To give you a little bit of the geography, representing diaspora and diverse blackness in musology is in the 5th floor conference room, which is directly underneath this room. And I think Allison who's at the door, can point you in the right direction. And where international becomes local, immigration in the D.C. metro area is in the Daniel Patrick Moynihan boardroom, which maybe is actually an appropriate place, given his urban interests. And that is where some of you already gathered to have breakfast this morning. It's just catty corner to this room. We'll have 2 sets of sessions, and then at 1 o'clock we'll have lunch, which is in the dining room, which is on that side of the 6th floor. And when we get to that time, we'll point you in the right direction. Lunch will be the next time we'll gather as a group. We have a lot of interesting speakers and discussions, and we will get the session started in 10 minutes, so you have a little bit of a break. And I just want to thank you all for coming. This is a big day for the Wilson Center. It's an important conference, and it's great to have the center connect a little bit with DC. So thank you all.